Hi, I'm AnewZ and you're watching AnewZ. Here are the headlines. Donald Trump does not rule out force to take Panama Canal and Greenland. Rescuers search for survivors after quake in Tibet claims at least 126 lives. President of Azerbaijan Ilham Aliyev calls for constitutional amendments in Armenia to secure peace deal. Thank you for tuning in. US President-elect Donald Trump refused to rule out using military force to pursue acquisition of the Panama Canal and Greenland, day after Congress certified his victory in the November election. Trump, who takes office on January 20th, also floated the idea of turning Canada into a US state, said he would demand far higher defense spending from NATO allies, and promised to change the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America.
President-elect Donald Trump declined to rule out military or economic action to regain control over the Panama Canal and acquire Greenland, describing them as crucial to U.S. economic and national security. To pressure Denmark into selling Greenland, he suggested imposing tariffs, despite Denmark's firm stance that Greenland is not for sale. When asked if he could rule out using military or economic force to gain control of the Panama Canal and Greenland, Trump said he cannot assure that on either of those two.
Well, we need Greenland for national security purposes. I've been told that for a long time, long before I even ran. I mean, people have been talking about it for a long time. You have approximately 45,000 people there. People really don't even know if Denmark has any legal right to it. But if they do, they should give it up because we need it for national security. That's for the free world. Panama Canal is vital to our country. It's being operated by China. China. And we gave the Panama Canal to Panama. We didn't give it to China. And they've abused it. They've abused that gift. It should have never been made, by the way. Giving the Panama Canal is why Jimmy Carter lost the election, in my opinion, more so maybe than the hostages.
Trump also reiterated interest in making Canada a U.S. state, criticizing American spending on Canadian goods and military support. Another striking proposal was Trump's vow to rename the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America, which he praised as a beautiful name. He also restated his intention to impose significant tariffs on Mexico and Canada, further straining relations with two key U.S. neighbors.
Economic force. Because Canada and the United States, that would really be something. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, and you take a look at what that looks like, and it would also be much better for national security. Don't forget, we basically protect Canada. We don't need anything they have. We don't need their dairy products. We have more than they have. We don't need anything. So why are we losing $200 billion a year and more to protect Canada? No, right. But why are we supporting a country, $200 billion plus a year? Our military is at their disposal. All of these other things, they should be a state. That's why I told Trudeau when he came down, I said, what would happen if we didn't do it?
Turning to defense, Trump proposed NATO members increase their defense spending target to 5% of their GDP, criticizing allies for not meeting existing commitments.
Well, I think NATO should have 5%, yeah. Well, you can't do it at 2%. I mean, at 2%, every country, if you're going to have a country in a regular military, you're at 4%. I think they should be, they're in dangerous territory. I think it should be, they can all afford it, but they should be at 5%, not 2%. I'm the one that got them to pay 2%.
The press conference held a day after Congress formally certified Trump's election victory. President-elect prepares to take office on January 20th.
On Donald Trump's request for NATO members to spend more on defense, we earlier spoke to Melih Demirtas, a researcher at the Cappadocia University. Here's what he had to say.
Yes, thank you again for this important times interview, because Mr. Trump's coming. International political experts, area experts, and all these diplomats, I think, are expecting now something will change very soon. Mr. Trump actually repeated these words for maybe more than 1 year, and in his first term of presidency, we also saw that the relations between United States and NATO are not positive. Please remember the former NATO chief secretary, Mr. Stoltenberg, and the efforts of him, and now Mr. Mark Rutte's efforts for revitalizing and reconstructing NATO's spirit. But Mr. Trump, I think, thinks again from the side of a tradesman. He's a very successful tradesman. He's a very successful maybe economist, but also his style of this tradesman ideology is directly affecting now this diplomacy, heavy or realistic diplomacy in our geography. 2%, 5%. Look at this, please. This is very, typical tradesman style. But one thing is very, very sure that this geography is a dangerous geography. The Eurasian, the Middle Eastern affairs, I think since the end of the Second World War, we have seen that Germans, French, British, they had, of course, see themselves in a very isolated vacuum. They, of course, spending more on their education, on their cultural sectors, on, of course, transportation and everything. But the world never stopped. The threats never stopped. And we have once again seen that the Ukrainian crisis, especially now, also the ongoing Middle Eastern humanitarian crisis, I think some actors must really contribute with the money, with the military personnel, like Turkey, I think, have done for many, many years with the equipment of the military personnel, diplomatic menace. I think more actors must do something for more endeavor, I think.
The finance goal is set to be updated at the meeting in Hague in June. And Mark Rutte said there needs to be a shift to a, quote, wartime mindset. Given that the last goal was set in 2014 and NATO is now faced with, you mentioned it, Ukrainian war, how much could the threshold be expected to rise?
The economies are different. I think the European Union economy, the Eastern European NEV partner, the Baltic states NEV partners, of course, Turkish economy, as you know, we are in a transition process. We are endeavoring to do our best also with contributing to the budget with our maximum level. But as I said, with the humanitarian and with the diplomatic contributions are also so important. The thresholds, as you said, that 2%, 3% is now the accepted thresholds for especially leading European actors like Germany, like France. But some of them, like these, I don't want to call small states, but in a size or in a population manner, yes, they are small, like the Baltic states, like Greece. They had some threat perceptions from the past, from the historical, of course, scenarios, and they seen the Poland also. They're already exceeded, I think, the 3%. Sometimes they reach the 4%, like Mr. Trump maybe also wished to do. But the NATO has, I think, something to discuss in this new term. What can change in this NATO restructuring, in NATO bureaucratic level? Please don't forget that NATO is also a very huge bureaucratic institution, like the European Union sometimes very harshly criticized. NATO is also so criticized since the end of the Cold War, because there are so many threats. We all know that, from the climate crisis to terrorism to earthquakes and global warming. Of course, NATO had done many things for this changing concept, but still, we must also come together, I think, in a common spirit manner. Think about the United States and Turkey as, for example, changing perceptions in the Middle Eastern affairs. Once again, Mr. Macron, I think, French president, I think 5 or 6 years ago, like this NATO spirit is shaken, or the brain dead, the famous word. The brain dead is also coming to NATO members, he said. So somehow, I can say half and half, it can have a truth in the saying. And I think Mr. Trump, in his own way, saying this, because we must prevent this brain death, we must do something. We must come together to think about these thresholds. Yes, this 5% is sometimes it's a very big threshold for some countries, also for Turkey maybe. But we can come to discuss first for Mr. Trump and also United Kingdom and Turkey as the other leading partner of NATO.
You have already mentioned that some member states have surpassed the 2% mark. Poland, for example, is already near Trump's new ask with 4.7% of its GDP allocated to defense. Would you say that another increase wouldn't be a problem for Poland, the Baltic states, and most recently Finland, given their proximity to Russia?
Well, I think, yes, it's again depending on the economies, because the international relations are always contradicting sides with domestic politics. We all know that. These foreign policy makers cannot calculate sometimes the economic crisis, the domestic impulses inside the particular states, as we know that the diplomacy, especially in this time, must take into account these domestic affairs. Because of this, we don't know the current economic balances in the world. After the COVID, these economic balances the inflation increases are affecting all the countries. For the small economies, not small, but stable economies, stable communities, stable population, stable revenues. Yes, such economies, I think, can do something like increasing its spending to 4.5 can be. But for example, for Turkey or for even Germany, think about this German economy. Now, in the last weeks, we all discussed that even in this big giant industrial German economy, we have seen some problems, some negative sides. So for these new coming elections, also in such member countries like Germany or like also in other partner countries, I think the dialogue is first of all must be under the table of this NATO headquarters. And as you said, we can maybe have different segments of partnerships. I think Mr. Trump can offer maybe this, like this line of the borderline of the countries with Russia, with the crisis geographies. Maybe they can do their best about this increasing of thresholds, and the second sector of the other countries come, for example, in the second, increase wave of Mr. Trump's, proposal. We will all discuss this, I think, in the coming term of Mr. Trump. But the nightmare or the negative scenario will be what Mr. Trump said in the past, that we can exit from NATO. Once again, he said, I think not once again, several times he said, if you cannot maybe believe this, if you cannot maybe force all the members with your ideals, we can even exit from NATO, he said. It is very interesting that because the common spirit or the constituent spirit, I think, has come always from the United States. And then we must discuss what will be the new structuring of NATO after such a decision, after such a radical decision.
Going back to his argument of U.S. footing the bill, according to data from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, the U.S. covered some 68% of NATO spending in 2023, with the alliance's members from the EU fronted 28%. Is Trump's argument solid, given not only the amount, but also the size of the economies?
I think we must understand, first of all, NATO is a post-Second World War institution. Second World War is still the worst nightmare in human history. If you compare the population loss, if you compare this, all these sizes of the construction level, deconstruction level of the countries, we can say that it is the worst nightmare since the end of this Second World War. We have never seen such a worse scenario. Now, NATO also wants to find another spirit, I think, after the end of the Second World War. In the Cold War, we have seen that rivalry between these two important camps, Soviet Union and United States. But after the end of this rivalry, we have seen that NATO must think again. I think not NATO, but United States must think again what can it's done with this institution. Mr. Trump maybe wants to say this. Half statement, half tradesman. He wants to say this. How can I can make a new marketing project with NATO? Maybe he wants to say, because this marketing project started to be not so fruitful or profitable for many nations. Because as I said, that in Ukrainian crisis, for example, we have seen many losses of civilian life, and we have seen still a continued deconstruction of the countries in Ukrainian and Russian borders. And now Mr. Trump maybe wants to say that, yes, United States is the leading actor. We must always keep in mind that this institution must change maybe, like it changed in the end of the Cold War.
Melih, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights.
Thank you. Thank you.
While Trump said the US needs Greenland for national security purposes, the Prime Minister of Denmark said that Greenland is not for sale. William Denslow brings more reactions from Brussels.
At a press conference on Tuesday, Donald Trump claimed that Greenland was surrounded by Russian and Chinese ships. For that reason, citing national security concerns, he called on Denmark to give Greenland up. If not, Donald Trump warned that Denmark could face very high tariffs imposed by Washington. Now, Greenland is an autonomous Danish territory, and Donald Trump's remarks have been met with a strong response from Denmark's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen, who says that not only is Greenland not for sale, but she said that Greenland is for Greenlanders. We've also heard from French officials warning against the threat of seemingly attacks on what they described as EU sovereign borders, Denmark, of course, being a member of the European Union. When it comes to the EU's responses, well, Commission officials were quizzed on this by members of the press on Wednesday, and Commission spokesperson said that they don't comment on comments, but they said that sovereign states must be respected, or the sovereignty of states must be respected, adding, though, that as the EU braces for the Trump administration that comes into office on January 20th, they say that they are hoping for strong cooperation on areas of interest. A Commission spokesperson also urged the international community and the press, indeed, to dial down the temperature, saying that this at this stage is purely hypothetical, and comments from a president-elect, someone who's not yet in office. The EU does add, though, that they hope to find positive areas of outcome working with Washington going forward, but they say they are preparing for all potential outcomes when Donald Trump is in office, and that they will defend their interests as needed. But ultimately, the bottom line, as far as the EU is concerned, is to find areas of cooperation. William Denslow, for AnewZ, Brussels.
Still on the subject of Trump's press conference, Panama fired back at the US president-elect, saying that the sovereignty of the Panama Canal is non-negotiable. Foreign Minister Javier Martinez Acha called the canal Panama's irreversible conquest, saying it is solely under Panama's control and will remain that way. He also reaffirmed the country's commitment to neutrality in any conflict, stressing that the canal's primary mission is to serve global trade. At least 2 people have been killed and dozens more injured as firefighters in Los Angeles continue to battle 4 wildfires around the city. Tens of thousands have been evacuated.
The wildfire, which began Tuesday, has already burned over 510 hectares in the Pacific Palisades area, nestled between Santa Monica and Malibu in the United States. 30,000 residents have been forced to evacuate as flames engulf homes and create gridlock on roads leading to safety. Firefighters are battling around the clock, using aircraft to drop water and bulldozers to clear roads for emergency vehicles. Television images show homes engulfed in flames and traffic at a standstill as residents attempt to flee. The National Weather Service has issued its highest fire alert, warning the worst is yet to come as wind conditions are expected to worsen overnight.
Yeah, this fire came out from, looked like the ridge on top of Palisades Drive and like Lockman Lane, etc. And the wind is howling at 38, 40 miles an hour, major gusts, and it's just blowing right down to the beach.
Flying embers have already set palm trees ablaze along Sunset Boulevard, with firefighters working to contain the damage and prevent further evacuations.
Well, obviously people's lives. Property damage is property damage. Losing lives, dogs, animals, horses, a lot of horses in the neighborhood. So Yes, so that's what matters.
The situation remains critical as firefighters race against time to protect lives and property in one of LA's most exclusive neighborhoods.
More than 14,000 rescue workers have arrived in Tibet to continue the search for survivors after a strong earthquake killed at least 126 people in a remote part of western China. More than 400 people have been rescued so far, according to Chinese state media.
The search for survivors entered a second day. As of 8 a.m. local time, more than 500 aftershocks were recorded in the Tingri. The 6.8 magnitude earthquake hit Tingri in China's Tibet region on Tuesday, with at least 126 people confirmed death and 188 others injured. Rescue efforts are ongoing to locate possible survivors buried beneath the rubble. Emergency personnel set up rows of temporary housing tents and allocated thousands of relief supplies. Chinese government has activated emergency response programs and dispatched works team to support rescue operations and offer guidance on post-quake emergency assessment of buildings and municipal facilities. Over $13 million from the Central Natural Disaster Relief Fund has been allocated to support the rescue operation and relocation of affected residents. According to the Chinese officials, more than 400 people trapped in foothills of Himalayas have been rescued, while over 30,000 residents have been relocated. Tremors from the quake were also felt in the neighboring Bhutan and India.
As rescue teams race to find survivors of the Tibet quake, our Laura Westbrook brings the latest from Hong Kong.
Videos on Chinese state media showed rescue workers pulling victims from the rubble, and officials say they've rescued more than 400 people. Now, this is a remote part of Tibet near the Himalayan border with Nepal. More than 3,600 houses were destroyed by this 6.8 magnitude quake. According to reports, many of the fallen houses were constructed from materials such as stone, mud bricks, and wood. Now, the high altitude and temperatures overnight dropping to as low as minus 18 degrees Celsius are hampering efforts to find survivors and also affecting those left homeless. Footage on state media showed families huddled in tents erected by soldiers. They have been given electric heaters, but they are having to deal with these very cold conditions. Survivors are also having to contend with hundreds of aftershocks. Some 30,000 residents have been relocated, and Chinese President Xi Jinping has called for all-out search and rescue efforts. He's also ordered survivors to be properly resettled. We've also heard from other world leaders, including Russian President Vladimir Putin, who expressed his sincere condolences. Now, the closest city to the quake's epicenter was Tibet's second largest city of Shigatse. This is regarded as a holy site, as the seat of the Panchen Lama, the second highest spiritual leader in Tibetan Buddhism after the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama has also said he was deeply saddened and offered his prayers to those who lost their lives. Earthquakes are common in the region, which lies on a major geological fault line, but Tuesday's was one of China's deadliest in recent years. Laura Westbrook for AnewZ, Hong Kong.
Protesters in Tel Aviv blocked roads calling for the immediate release of hostages as negotiations for a Gaza ceasefire deal appeared to stall.
Families of hostages held by Hamas for 15 months took to the streets, holding large photos of their loved ones. They urged the Israeli government to secure the hostages' release and halt its military campaign against Hamas in Gaza. Hamas reiterated its demand for Israel to end its military operations in Gaza as a condition for any hostage release deal on Tuesday. The group also dismissed comments by US President-elect Donald Trump, who warned of how to pay if hostages were not freed by his January 20 inauguration.
year ago, the 5 photos of the 5 young women was published in the Daily Mail, and a year after, they are still there. We are all here together to demand a deal now. There is a deal on the table. There is a negotiation. The government must sign the deal. They must come home. They must come back. They've been there for more than 400 days. It's devastating to see them. Liri Elbag, just this Saturday, we saw her voice. All of us were devastated. They can't stay there. They have to come back home now.
I have to be optimistic because maybe President Trump's election will get will jolt the system in a way, because for the past 15 months everything was stuck. So maybe him coming to power will get the balance of power differently, so we will have advancement in the stock. I'm optimistic, of course, I have to be optimistic.
The ongoing negotiations mediated by Qatar and Egypt represented the most intense efforts in months to broker a ceasefire in Gaza. However, little progress has been reported so far.
Syria requires $4 billion in aid this year, but only 33% has been funded, said the president of the International Committee of the Red Cross, Mirjana Spoljarić-Egger, at the end of a 3-day visit to Syria. She announced that ICRC will expand its work in the country, citing pressing needs in the health, water and power sectors.
The president of the International Committee of the Red Cross, Mirjana Egger, has concluded a 3-day visit in Syria. Her visit comes as the country has seen a transition in government following the ousting of former President Bashar al-Assad by a rebel group last month. Now, with an end to a 13-year-long conflict in the country, Egger emphasizes the need to respect international humanitarian law and provide answers for families of missing detainees.
There are potentially tens of thousands of missing people that we have not yet identified, but we are already following up on over 40,000 cases. This is a huge task ahead of us. I'm aware that thousands of families are looking for their relatives, and this is an agony that nobody wants to go through. We are working with our partners to be able to inform them as quickly as possible. But it's been years since the ICRC has had access to all detainees, and we see the consequences of it.
President Egger visited the cities of Aleppo and Idlib, in which she saw efforts to support essential services like water supply and healthcare, both of which have been heavily impacted by years of conflict. She also calls on stakeholders to protect such crucial infrastructure.
If anything happens to the power or the water supply coming from these two plants, it can potentially affect millions of people. So I'm calling on all the parties and everybody who has an influence to protect the sites, to protect at all times critical infrastructure, especially in the health sector, in the water sector, and in the energy sector.
Syria requires $4 billion in aid, and the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reports that only 33% has been funded, leaving a gap of over $2.5 billion.
Street vendors in Damascus now provide easy access to fuel, a stark contrast to the restrictions under Bashar al-Assad's rule. Earlier, Syrians often had to wait for government notifications that specified when and how much subsidized fuel they were allowed to purchase.
Fuel vendors in Damascus are thriving in the post-Assad era, offering much-needed gasoline and diesel to Syrians, a far cry from the scarcity and state repression under Bashar al-Assad's regime. Under Assad, street vendors faced crackdowns, confiscations, and harsh penalties for selling fuel without state approval.
We used to set up our stalls, but they used to come and take our goods. We could not even set up our stalls. We used to set up our stalls in the suburbs. They did raids and crackdowns on us. Some people used to betray us, report us, and they would even confiscate the goods. The security forces, customs authorities, Air Force intelligence, all of them, they would come at us, take everything, and leave us unable to work.
Fuel shortages were rampant, with many citizens waiting for state-issued messages to buy fuel.
It's completely different. You used to dream of getting into a gas station with a motorbike. As soon as you entered the gas station, they would kick you out and tell you motorcycles are not allowed. You would have to beg them for half an hour just to fill up 1 liter. And sometimes they would not even give that to you.
Since Assad's fall, vendors have enjoyed newfound freedom, helping ease fuel access for the public. Despite ongoing international sanctions, which limit Syria's ability to import critical goods, there is hope for trade deals in the future. In the meantime, fuel sellers in Damascus continue to operate openly, providing a vital service to locals.
Ukrainian drones struck an oil depot in Russia's Saratov region, causing explosions and a massive fire, disrupting fuel supplies to a strategic bomber airbase, according to the Ukrainian military. Kiev says the target was the Krystal complex, which supplies fuel to the Engels II military airfield, home to the strategic aviation fleet of the Russian Aerospace Forces. Governor of the Saratov region confirmed an attack took place, while the Russian Ministry of Defense said that its air defenses intercepted and destroyed 32 Ukrainian drones overnight. Consulate General of Poland was closed today in Russia's St. Petersburg. Moscow decided to close it in December 2024 in response to Warsaw's decision to close the Russian consulate in Poznan. The Russian Foreign Ministry said in a statement it was also declaring 3 of the Polish consulate's diplomatic staff members persona non grata. Poland's Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski reacted, saying Russia had no right to act in such a way, as Poland's decision to close the consulate in Poznan was a reaction to Russia's sabotage and arson in Poland. French Prime Minister François Bayrou held talks with the opposition to try and find a way for an urgently needed budget. Ross Cullen brings more on that from Paris.
The French Prime Minister François Bayrou convened members of the opposition for crucial discussions to see if there can be a way forward, agreement between the parties on France's budget. Now, the budget that is currently in force is the 2024 budget because there was no agreement by MPs before the end of last year, and so they rolled over the 2024 budget into this year as a temporary measure, a stopgap to avoid a US-style shutdown because the plans for this year's budget collapsed in December with the ousting of Michel Barnier, the previous Prime Minister, the first time a sitting Premier had been removed by lawmakers since the 1960s. And so François Bayrou, the new Prime Minister, is trying to get a broad spectrum of political views to inform on the budget plans to make sure that the budget will be able to pass Parliament. He has said that he doesn't want to use this special parliamentary tool to force legislation through the National Assembly. He does want MPs to vote on and approve his budget. However, a reminder that he and his ministers and the government are well short of a majority. It is imperative in the National Assembly at the moment in France for the government to be able to rely on votes from the left, votes from the Green Party, from the right, from the far right. They need a broad spectrum of MPs to vote in favour of legislation for it to pass because they are a minority government. And the budget is a crucial measure, and we have already had the left saying that they would like to see changes to the controversial pension reform of 2023. The Prime Minister says he's open to something called adjustments to that. We don't have the exact details of what he means by adjustments. President Macron will be very wary of any idea to unravel that contentious reform, which he regards as an important part of his legacy, but which set off street riots and major mass protests during 2023. So we'll see if there can be any movement on pensions. When it comes to the budget, they have to pass it as soon as possible. As I said, France has the 2024 budget in place at the moment. Going forward for the Prime Minister, the key focus point for next week will be the 14th of January. Every new Prime Minister in France has to make a general declaration, a major set-piece speech in front of MPs, laying out their policy priorities for the new government and the direction of travel. And a warning that 2 days later, there is the possibility that Francois Bayrou could face next week a no-confidence vote, just like the one that brought down his predecessor, Michel Barnier, in December. I'm Ross Cullen for AnewZ in Paris.
Eurozone inflation rose to 2.4% in December, marking the third rise in as many months and damping hopes of a big rate cut by the European Central Bank later this month. The increase, however, was in line with market expectations.
Inflation in the 20 nations sharing the euro peaked up to 2.4% last month from 2.2% in November, in line with expectations. It was lifted by more expensive energy and stubbornly high services costs. The European Central Bank cut interest rates 4 times last year and said its target is now within sight. More policy easing is coming, although the speed and timing remain subject to debate. Price growth excluding volatile food and energy held at 2.7%. And the closely watched services component, the single biggest item in the consumer price basket, accelerated to 4% from 3.9%. A strong dollar in recent weeks has been making imports of key commodities more expensive, and that's feeding through to prices via more expensive energy, including car fuel. The dollar could rise even more if the new U.S. administration implements its trade tariff proposals.
Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev gave an interview to several television channels, including AnewZ. Aliyev shared his views on the country's social and economic situation, international and regional relations.
President of Azerbaijan Ilham Aliyev spoke about regional and international issues during his big interview to several television channels, including AnewZ. Commenting the issue on normalization of Armenia-Azerbaijan relations, the president stated that securing a peace deal with Armenia is possible only with the implementation of constitutional amendments in this country. He emphasized that such changes are essential for the stability and future relations between the two nations.
I hope that all our conditions regarding the peace treaty will be accepted, because there are no extraordinary issues in these conditions. The abolition of the Minsk Group, the amendment of the constitution. Without these, a peace treaty is impossible. If Armenia does not need a peace treaty, we do not need it either. We can live and conduct our own policy without signing it. In other words, I would still advise the Armenian side to weigh everything up, including geopolitical changes in the world. Their close friends are being shamefully removed from the political scene. Yesterday, news came that Mr. Trudeau, a close friend of Armenia and Pashinyan, also had to resign.
President Ilham Aliyev also expressed his discontent with the European Union's actions in the region, particularly criticizing the EU's alignment with Armenia during the normalization process. He highlighted a series of disappointments, including the extension of the EU's observation mission without Azerbaijan's consent, which he argues undermined the trust.
It is difficult to say how our relations with the European Commission will develop, but I must say that last year was a year full of disappointments, because it was last year that the European Union unequivocally took Armenia's side in the normalization process. There are many facts, which you also know very well. Of course, the way the so-called observation mission of the European Union was extended did not strengthen, but on the contrary, undermined the trust. After all, when we demanded that it be agreed with us, it was not because we have some inflated ambitions, but simply because the very establishment of this mission and its sending to our border was agreed with us, personally with me, in Prague, in October 2022. If we agreed then that it would be 2 months and 40 people, then that is how it should be. When I agree, even in words, I always stick to these agreements. But in this case, Europe felt that they had the right to violate these agreements. But then, without any notification, without any agreement with us, they not only extended this mission, they increased it and even invited a country that is not a member of the European Union, essentially undermining trust. Now, What happens next, I don't know. The commission is new, although some characters are old. But still, it is a new commission, and what attitude to Azerbaijan and its national interests it will have, the same attitude will be to them.
President Ilham Aliyev reflected on the aftermath of the attack on Azerbaijan's embassy in Tehran, which he described as an organized act of terror. He highlighted inconsistencies in the Iranian government's response. He also criticized the actions of certain Iranian officials and demanded accountability for the insults directed at Azerbaijan, insisting that Iran must take concrete steps to address these issues and restore trust between the two nations.
It is difficult to analyze the relations with the new government because I have not personally met with the new president. If and when it happens, then I can talk about it. As for the provincial mullah's hateful attitude towards us, this is not the first time. That mullah from the city of Ardabil has repeatedly used insulting expressions against Azerbaijan, the Azerbaijani people, including me. The question here is what the attitude of the person who appointed him to that position is. After all, he did not come and sit there on his own. We know very well who appointed him. What is his reaction? Does he support this or not? And who will apologize to Azerbaijan? Will they apologize or not? The regret in the statement of the Iranian Foreign Ministry is not enough. There was an open insult. Both the presidents of Turkey and Azerbaijan, our peoples, and during a live broadcast at an official event. And only regret. This, of course, is unacceptable. Therefore, we believe that the provincial mullah should be punished. At the very least, he should be dismissed from his post and made to apologize to Azerbaijan. This is the point.
President Ilham Aliyev was also asked about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He reaffirmed Azerbaijan's long-standing position of supporting a two-state solution.
Our position on the Israeli-Palestinian issue remains unchanged. We have always been in favor of the creation, in other words, the existence of two states. The creation of an independent Palestinian state will put an end to this conflict. I think everyone should understand this. As you know, we have been supporting the Palestinian state for many years, politically, morally, and materially, and this continues. The Palestinian embassy has been operating in Azerbaijan for many years. We have also opened a representative office in Palestine, and of course, the sooner this conflict ends and a ceasefire is declared in Gaza, the better it will be for everyone.
Talking about Middle East issues, President Ilham Aliyev expressed strong support for the positive changes in Syria.
Whatever is in Turkey's interest, it is in our interest too. Our security is the same, our interests are the same, and our future is the same, both in the Middle East and at the same time in Europe. We touched on this issue a little. A completely new situation is emerging. A strong Turkish factor will play a key role here. We are with Turkey. In other words, our power will increase even more. The vast geography encompassing Europe, Asia, the South Caucasus, and the Caspian Basin is already a serious geopolitical factor in itself. Military power, political power, economic potential, unity, and today it is impossible to see countries so interconnected as Turkey and Azerbaijan anywhere in the world. Therefore, we are very hopeful, and the changes in Syria make us very happy. First for Turkey, and secondly for ourselves. Because for 12 years, we have had no relations with Syria.
President Aliyev also criticized French President Macron's recent accusations against Azerbaijan.
As for France, what is happening on the political scene there now? Everyone can see that. Yesterday, the French president made further absurd accusations against Azerbaijan. It seems that Mr. Macron cannot live without Azerbaijan. He has some kind of mania and wants to blame all his sins on us. I think that if we have become so strong that we can interfere in the internal affairs of France and change something, We can simply be proud of it. In fact, this statement is an admission of his own helplessness. A president of a great state suffers from the actions of a country with a population of 10 million located far away in the Caucasus region. However, we have nothing to do with the internal affairs of France. Simply put, this was brought about by wrong approaches and irrelevant policies. If there is a consensus in French political circles, it is a consensus only on Azerbaijanophobia.
In response to a question from AnewZ about the significance of COP29 being held in Azerbaijan, President Aliyev emphasized that it was both a challenge and an opportunity, with one key success being the resolution of the decade-long deadlock on the carbon market, achieving consensus on Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Additionally, financing saw a significant breakthrough, tripling commitments from $100 billion to $300 billion.
Yes, COP29 was a big challenge for us and, of course, a big opportunity. And our task was to convert the challenge into success. Of course, we clearly realized that Azerbaijan, as not the biggest gas emission country, cannot play a decisive role in bringing the world together. But we thought that our experience in international institutions and diversified foreign policy will help us to build bridges.
On energy cooperation with Europe, the head of state said that Azerbaijan has expanded its gas exports to 12 countries, including 10 in Europe, doubling supplies since 2022.
And for many countries, members of the European Union, Azerbaijani gas now makes about half of their domestic consumption. And this is really a serious support which we demonstrate to our partners in Europe. So our future plans are to expand the geography. We already are in negotiations with some other European countries which are close to those which are already receiving our gas.
President Aliyev outlined Azerbaijan's plans to boost output from new and existing fields, but emphasized that Europe must address financing challenges as banks pull back from fossil fuel projects. He stressed the need for Europe to invest in infrastructure to sustain and expand supply, noting that while Azerbaijan is doing its part, Europe must also fulfill its responsibilities.
At the same time,
As Donald Trump returns to the White House on January 20th, his journey back to the Oval Office has been anything but ordinary. From legal battles and political setbacks to assassination attempts, Trump's return was once deemed impossible by many. We examine how this unexpected victory has been perceived globally, including in Azerbaijan.
Somebody has to help this country, and if they don't, the country and the world are in big trouble.
With 12 days left until President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration ceremony, with his victory having already been certified by the US Congress, many now seem to have forgotten that his return to the White House was once deemed unthinkable. For the man himself, a comeback in some form or shape has perhaps never been a matter of if, but that of must, even when he bid farewell to Washington on a cold January morning in early 2021.
Thank you and farewell. God bless you. God bless the United States of America.
In the years that followed, Trump faced tribulations and trials, being squarely blamed for Republican losses, and many external observers did not deign to consider his journey from a diminished ex-president to a victor clinching last-ditch triumph as remotely possible. This was the case in July 2024 too, as Trump was doing his level best to turn his legal woes into fuel, nurturing voters' anger, capitalizing on public discontent engulfing the country over inflation. He was also making his way through indictments, convictions and assassination attempts. Even when he stood surrounded by Secret Service agents, raising his fist in the air, shouting "Fight, fight, fight" after an assassination attempt made on the 13th of July, not his prospective victory, but future glorious failure that many thought would be possible. However, unpredictability, a quality generally associated with Trump's personality, was perceived in a different light by some others. For Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev, for instance, his prospects were not so impossible. When questioned about the subject at the Shusha Global Media Forum in July 2024, the Azerbaijani leader did not shy away from making his views clear.
I am absolutely sure that you know perfectly well what preference I would make. And I think I am not the only one in Azerbaijan. As far as we are concerned, of course we look at this situation through our own prism. The decision will be made by the American people. It is their president that will be elected. But it is also of great importance for the whole world, because the fate of many and many peoples and countries will largely depend on the decisions that will be made by the first person of the United States.
Back then, Aliyev also stated that his country enjoyed very fruitful cooperation based on mutual respect, adding that relations with the United States were largely stable under the Republican administration.
During the presidency of President Trump, we enjoyed very fruitful cooperation, relations based on mutual respect and appreciation of mutual support on different tracks. Our relations with the United States were pretty stable, despite ups and downs, which happened not on our initiative.
For Aliyev, Trump's campaign message, built upon an argument that there were no wars under his administration, was something deserving respect. Indeed, this evaluation of the Azerbaijani leader could most certainly be regarded as amounting to, if not an outright endorsement, but a subtle prediction and a carefully constructed statement as to his preference. And when asked about President-elect Trump's return to the White House during a press conference on the 7th of January, Ilham Aliyev reiterated his earlier thoughts, reflecting on the prospects of Baku-Washington relations.
There is hope. Mr. Trump sends very clear, direct messages with his statements. Now, it might not be possible to analyze all of them, but I can say that the vast majority of them are shared by Azerbaijani society. Therefore, hopes are high. That's why I said that there is hope. There is great hope. This includes the possibility of advancing US-Azerbaijan strategic relations. I believe that if both sides are interested, we can elevate US-Azerbaijan relations to a strategic level.
Well, indeed, there seems to be a sense of hope in the air. The year 2025 will be different. Of that, there is no doubt. Yet, whether the perceived optimism surrounding Trump's re-election will materialize is another question.
In business news, SOCAR Turkey has announced plans to invest $7 billion to establish new petrochemical facilities in the coming years. The first feasibility study has already been completed.
Speaking at a meeting in Istanbul, SOCAR Turkey Chief Executive Officer Elçin İbarov said that the company, which started its operations in 2008, has invested $18.5 billion to date. According to him, they envisage an investment of approximately $7 billion to establish new petrochemical facilities, but there are many factors, such as which units will be established and from which countries those units will be bought, because of the front-end engineering design study. He stressed that the company expects the FEED period of the project to be 18 to 24 months, and the final decision phase of the project can be started with the completion of the FEED process by the end of 2026.
Over in China, tourists are flocking to the Bositeng Lake in the Xinjiang region. The largest freshwater lake in the province is famous for its winter season's icy activities.
The REACH program around Boston Lake offers tourists folk performances, snow sculptures in unique shapes, and diverse ice and snow sports. Activities such as camel rides on snow, cross-country snow races, and snowmobiling add to the lake's charm. This season, approximately 50 cultural and tourism events will be held at the lake. Highlights include winter fishing, a grand fish feast for 10,000 people, ice and snow tournaments, and desert cross-country races. These events promise to create a true festival of ice and snow for visitors.
I saw a lot of ice tourism projects and tasted the local specialities of bohu fish, as well as the boiled pear with the rock sugar. It is really great.
Boston Lake, whose name means oasis in the Uyghur language, is the largest, covering an area of over 1,600 square kilometers. This unique natural treasure was known as the Western Sea in ancient times. With its stunning landscapes and vibrant events, Boston Lake attracts both local and international tourists every year. For those seeking the magic of ice and snow, this destination is the perfect choice.
Well, that's all from us for now. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to AnewZ.